Greetings. Today we're going to do our imperialism second wave lecture on the technology advantages that the Europeans had over all the other peoples of the world. So let's get started, shall we? All right, hello, fellow students. Let us start our discussion on second wave imperialism, which starts in the fin de siècle period. This lecture, we are going to specifically talk about quinine, gunboats, and the semi-automatic and the automatic firearm. These three technologies, more than any other thing, is going to allow the European powers, specifically the British and the French, but generally speaking also the Italians, the Spanish, and the Germans, as well as the United States, to go out to other parts of the world and conquer independent cultures and territories. All right, what you're looking at now is the symbol for quinine. Quinine is a drug that was very important to the history of imperialism. What does quinine do? Well, quinine in large quantities in the human body gives you an immunity to malaria. Malaria is a tropical disease, and for centuries, one of the reasons why Europeans were never able to conquer Africa or any other tropical region is because white people from Europe would literally get off the boat and step foot into the jungles of Africa, and literally within days they would acquire malaria and die. If you are African American, you might know somebody who has sickle cell anemia. Sickle cell anemia is what occurs when an African American who has two recessive gene traits that make you immune to malaria come together. So Africans in Africa are essentially immune to malaria, or the majority of them are. This is why you get sickle cell anemia. To the picture over here is the cinchona tree. The cinchona tree comes from South America, specifically Peru, and the cinchona tree is where quinine comes from. All right. In the 1820s, the British and the French start doing some experiments with the cinchona tree bark. So let's go on. All right. The Jesuits in the 17th century are the first people to connect the fact that this cinchona tree bark, when you distill it, when you cook it, when you mash it, give it to somebody who has malaria, the malaria decreases. By the 1820s, it is discovered that you can create this chemical that will get rid of malaria, and the plant, the cinchona tree, grows in large quantities in Peru. So Peru has a monopoly, and they're unwilling to sell the seeds to anybody. They want to become the supplier of quinine to the world. Well, it doesn't work out that way, because in a very interesting point, I wish somebody would make a movie about this, Dutch and English spies smuggle hundreds and hundreds of plants out, and they begin to plant and grow cinchona trees all over Southeast Asia. The English do this in India, and the Dutch do this in what we now call Myanmar, but what used to be called Burma. All right? And as these amounts of quinine become greater and greater, Europeans start to colonize Africa and India in larger and larger quantities. This disease was one of the things that kept Europeans out of Southeast Asia and out of Africa, and now that was no longer a problem. All right. Originally, as you see the bottle of Bombay Sapphire Gin, I'm not advocating drinking alcohol, but let me explain. Originally, the powdered form of quinine was mixed with wine. Europeans are very big wine drinkers. And then people started to use tonic water. You know, that's the stuff that makes your Coca-Cola, that makes your Pepsi bubbly. You can buy tonic water anywhere. Well, they started mixing quinine with tonic water. That's what makes the tonic water today bitter. You can still buy tonic water from Walmart, Kmart, wherever, and it still has quinine in it. And hence, Dutch spirits was a drink which was tonic water and gin, the famous gin and tonic that we have today. And British were very loved gin at this time, and so wherever they would go, they would bring gin with them and tonic. It was an excuse to drink alcohol in the afternoon, but they could always say, "Hey, I am protecting myself from malaria." Now, this, ladies and gentlemen, is a flat-bottom gunboat. Why are flat-bottom gunboats important? Oh, I will explain to you. Flat-bottom gunboats are important for a couple of reasons. First of all, before the flat-bottom gunboat, the largest military vessel were galleons, right? They were for deep-sea travel. Galleons had a very deep water line, all right? You see this here? You see this? This is what we call the water line. Beneath there, beneath that is another whole level, probably 1 or 2 decks of the ship. This is done because when the rough Atlantic storms start occurring, the storm doesn't capsize the ship. If you don't have a large, deep thing at the bottom of your ship that keeps you going, when those storms come in, you're going to tip right over and you're going to lose the ship and possibly hundreds of lives. So these ships were very deep under the water. But the problem with that is that these ships can't go upriver. They're too deep. They get stuck because the riverbeds are very, very shallow. Why is this important? Well, in the 19th century, the British, and actually all Europeans, love Chinese products. First of all, they love silk. But the problem is the Chinese aren't telling anybody how you get from this silkworms to this silk cloth. It is a national secret. So if the Brits and the French and the Germans and the Dutch and the Americans, the Canadians and the Mexicans want silk, they have to get it from China. Also, tea. Tea is very popular. If you take in American history, you know about the American Tea Party. The colonists threw over all this tea. Tea is a very popular drink. Also, what do we serve tea in? We serve it in porcelain. Tea and porcelain are extremely popular. Now, the British are growing tea in India, but all the fashionable people still drink tea from China. It's a cool thing to do, and it's a lot more expensive. In addition to that, not a lot of people know how to make porcelain. So again, the Chinese have a monopoly. All right? Almost kind of like today, where the Chinese are producing a lot of things and selling things to a lot of people. All right? Well, this upsets the British for a couple of reasons, and the French, and all the other Europeans, but particularly the British. Why? Because to trade with China means that you have to do the kowtow. And the kowtow is this thing where you go groveling to the local Chinese administrator, literally on your hands and knees, and tell them how much wonderful they are than you. Well, to white Europeans in the 19th century, this was a hard thing to swallow. It was very frustrating. But more importantly than that, the Chinese only wanted gold and silver to trade with. They didn't want British wool. They didn't want French wines. They didn't want Italian wines or Russian timber. They had all that. The Chinese only wanted gold and silver. Now, this is towards the end of mercantilism, and Europeans really felt part of their big foreign policy is to hoard as much gold and silver as they possibly can so no one can tell them what to do on the international market. And here you go, the Chinese, who are doing it better than the Europeans are. So this upsets them. Now, the British in India begin to produce something called opium. Opium is a drug, boys and girls. We get heroin, and we get several other drugs that are derivatives from opium. And opium is a seed that's processed from the poppy, right? It's a poppy. The poppy grows wild in Afghanistan and in eastern India, and we still use poppies today. But if you cultivate a certain way, you can turn it into a drug that you can smoke and get very high. Well, the Brits decided that they were going to trade opium to the Chinese for silk and tea and other products that they wanted. And of course, like any government, the Chinese banned the sale of opium because all of their productive citizens were now becoming drug addicts and not going to work and were becoming unemployed and unable to pay their taxes. So, in 1839, the British took some of those lovely gunboats that I showed you, They sailed them from England around Africa in deep water oceans, in the Atlantic Ocean, the Indian Ocean, right, and then the Pacific Ocean, up the Yellow River, up to Nanking, the Chinese capital, and they blew the capital to pieces. See, before this, the British could never really get to the Chinese capital because it was an inland capital, it wasn't on the coast. So the Chinese were kind of protected from European advances. Not after the invention of the gunboat. With the flat bottom gunboat that can sail in deep water, sail in the oceans, now there's a military advantage, another military advantage that the British have, and eventually all Europeans will have against Asians, in particular the Chinese. And here's a picture of that famous battle. And these Chinese junks, which are very efficient military weapons, are getting the crap blown out of them by Europeans. You can see that in the painting here. So this is another reason why the Europeans are able to crush people from other parts of the world. This concludes part 1 of our Imperialism and Technology lecture. Stay tuned for part 2. Thank you.